From connecting with friends and family, finding an online community to be a part of, all the way to shopping, social media has continuously shaped the way we consume. And with this emergence, we saw the growth of the influencer, leaders on social media who slowly garnered traction to impact the opinions and behavior of their followers. And with booming technological innovation, we realized that humans are not the only ones influencing humans. Introducing the virtual influencers. But with the rather recent introduction of these new forces, we can't help but wonder, what does the future of virtual influencers look like? So to understand the future, let's first understand the present. In the influencer market, we have two types, the original human influencers and the new virtual influencer. The key differentiator of the human influencer is their authenticity and their relatability. However, human error is inevitable, and this brings us to the virtual influencer's key differentiator, which is that their message can always be controlled. Virtual influencers are also cheaper to work with in the long run, and their avenues for content creativity are limitless. So, what does this tell us about the future of virtual influencers? Well, in addition to leveraging existing strengths, virtual influencers should overcome human advantages by continuing to innovate their technology and finding new avenues to appeal to the consumer. Well, speaking of consumers, let's also take a look at all the stakeholders involved in virtual influencing, which will allow us to identify the key strengths to leverage and wants to satisfy. On the consumer end, let's bring back the advantages of virtual influencers that we analyzed just now. From this, we can see that consumers love the creative content and consistency that virtual influencers can provide. But these are not the only things consumers care about. Followers also want a sense of relatability and authenticity from the influencers. High quality recommendations for products and services, and new and exciting content. These are three additional values that virtual influencers need to provide. Now, let's move on to scope out the trends and characteristics of the influencer market a little bit more. With increased digitization and a young consumer demographic, the influencer market continues to boom. And knowing that 69% of respondents use products reviewed by social media influencers, these individuals are becoming increasingly important in shaping consumer demand. Now, upon consideration of businesses, our team believes that small to medium-sized businesses are the specific target for influencer engagement and partnerships. Why? Because of SME's growing influence and digitization, as 62% of national employment in Southeast Asia is represented by them. In addition, these businesses are on the search for cost-effective, creative ways to conduct market research and launch their new products. So let's briefly summarize the key takeaways from each stakeholder. First, we know that consumers want creative, reliable, and new content from influencers. Well, influencers are increasingly able to satisfy this as they have the credibility and popularity to shape consumer demand. And finally, our potential partners, businesses, are in search of new avenues for growth and market research. Now, revisiting what the future of virtual influencing looks like, we realize that it's also imperative to go beyond and also ask, how can Ensemble leverage the influencers to innovate, grow, and establish their niche? To answer this, let's first decide what audiences these influencers should target. We considered 4 methods of segmentation: by country, industry, brand, or a single influencer image for all of Asia Pacific. To weigh these options, we asked ourselves 3 questions. First, which influencers would be more costly to create and implement? Next, which segments would be the most scalable for reach? And finally, which segment would be able to maintain authenticity and stay connected with their followers? Now, upon relative comparison of each criteria, our team felt that virtual influencers should be segmented by industry, creating experts that promote brands within a specific range of products and services. So let's go back to our steps on answering our problem statement. Now that we've decided to segment influencers by industry, which industries should Ensemble pursue? Well, on this graph, we found that the leading industries for new products in the Asia, on the next slide, we can see that leading industries for new products in the Asia Pacific region are food and cooking, health and fitness, fashion, travel, and beauty. Our team will tackle these industries first, in addition to the emerging industries of tech and gaming. The target is to have 1 influencer per industry, which will be executed through a 4-step process illustrated later on in our solution. Okay, so we know which industries our virtual influencers will operate in. Now, which channels should they use to effectively scale across Asia Pacific? Well, the 3 most popular channels for virtual influencer engagement are TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, each of which are designed for different types of engagement. TikTok is a promising platform to quickly reach as many views as possible through viral videos. Instagram is good for engaging in authentic interactions. And finally, YouTube is well known for influencer testimonials and reliable recommendation and products and services. To succeed, virtual influencers should leverage the unique advantages of each channel. So with these 3 steps, we have the analysis and necessary tools equipped to become a leader in the virtual influencing market. But how exactly does this knowledge help us envision Ensemble's future? Introducing our solution. We propose creating a suite of virtual influencers where each virtual influencer targets a different industry niche. To start, we want to focus on the 5 key industries that we identified, with each influencer focusing on establishing their character and marketing specific to that industry. To do this, our team came up with the 4-step process. Firstly, birth. We want to leverage the data to create influencers with unique backgrounds and personalities with developed stories that best target their industries. Secondly, grow. We want to start growing these influencers by helping small businesses test their products before they launch and further developing our niche in that industry. And thirdly, mature. We want the influencers to start maturing by collaborating with smaller launched businesses to ultimately gain traction and establish presence. And lastly, independence. We want to expand our sponsorship collaborations with much larger brands, not only boosting credibility, but also revenue. So now that we know what this process looks like, Sarah, can you dive deeper into stage 1?
Absolutely, Julia. So through the birth stage, we aim to help build the background and the stories of these influencers to tailor them appropriately to each niche market. And as a part of this, we have to better understand what it is the users will see on social media and what sorts of resources we need to help with the back-end operations. So diving deeper, we identified 4 key aspects of a typical influencer that need to be established. The backstory, including their childhood upbringing, motivations, and cultural ties. Next, their hobbies and interests and how their day-to-day experiences influence that audience. And lastly, we want to leverage SoMin AI to create a visual appearance that matches other influencers within that same demographic. So in terms of the actual content strategy, we want to help replicate the authenticity and the presence of a typical human influencer, starting off with older photos and hobbies and other character-defining content to attract an audience that resonates with them. In terms of content moving forward, we want to incorporate daily routines and lifestyle habits so viewers get a better idea of who they really are and connect with them. So now that we know what the audience will see, let's take a look at the back-end operations that bring this virtual influencer to life. So the back-end team has 4 key roles, and this starts with the analytics member who will be generating insights based on the data from SoMin AI. For instance, looking at what other influencers within that category are posting, or even emerging trends. From there, the content strategist will leverage those insights to develop a long-term plan in terms of the type of content to post on all of the platforms, which will then be designed into actual posts by the creative lead. Lastly, to manage any technical design elements, we will also have a visual effects lead. But how exactly will this play out with a real virtual influencer? To help you visualize, let's take a look at Jen. Jen is a 24-year-old freelance model from Kuala Lumpur who is passionate about fashion. As a child, she always used to dress up and put on her mom's jewelry. In fact, when she was little, her mom gave her a beautiful Pandora necklace that she still wears to this day. So Jen started off on TikTok with her virtual influencing, and after a viral video with 15,000 views, she started to see her Instagram following grow as well, reaching 170 followers overnight. And with that, Jen is born, a virtual fashion influencer who is looking to grow her social media presence and work with more brands. So how exactly can she achieve this? With step 2 of growth, virtual influencers will help SMEs conduct market research and test their products pre-launch to minimize that risk associated with the new product launch. We see 67% of SME marketers are struggling with a limited marketing budget, and Jen acts as their cost-effective and creative solution to conduct that research. So what exactly does this look like? As smaller growing brands start to reach out to those nano and micro influencers, we can create organic product placement posts to help them test before launching, analyzing key metrics and keywords in the comments. We actually see this is very common in the influencer space, where the follower base often leaves comments asking for more details on where products are from, showing positive signs of engagement. But let's better outline what the value add is for both stakeholders. Looking at influencers, we see they have a more consistent flow of creative content where they can better build their virtual brand by strategically placing products that fall within their industry niche. And through it all, they receive organic growth on their platforms. On the other hand, looking at small businesses, we see they have an easy access to this aggregated data. In addition, it's a less risky way for them to launch and test products using a cost-effective method for market research, all in all providing several benefits for both stakeholders. But let's go back. How does this impact Jen? So looking at an example, we see VLT, a local Malaysian jewelry company reaches out to her to test a potential new necklace. From there, Jen creates an organic post that shows off the necklace without explicitly placing the brand. Now, this could be anything from her, the selfie of her at the beach to a quick TikTok of her morning routine. And through this, Ensemble can generate insights and provide those back to VLT, in turn generating more engagement for Jen and more product insights for VLT. So revisiting her follower count, we see that by working with a few more brands like VLT, Jen is able to grow to 10,000 Instagram followers in just a few months. So Annabeth, how does Jen continue to mature as an influencer?
Thank you so much, Sarah. And now let's dive into mature. To help Jen mature, we'll be collaborating with more launched yet smaller brand name businesses to market their launched products. We want to leverage the niche personalities established through our birth and growth part of our solution to attract businesses to partner with. And with our capabilities to provide a tight yet intimate community, we can help businesses earn revenue while growing our own presence. This benefits virtual influencers because it helps them develop their brand and niche and allows them to earn more revenue through unique affiliate links on sponsored products. On the other side, it also benefits small businesses because we help them gain traction on their already launched products, ultimately helping them increase in sales and engagement. With the help of Jen in the growth stage talked about by Sarah earlier, VLT was able to get critical insights on the new products they were about to launch, and they decided to finally launch it. With this, Jen decides to continue working with VLT. But this time, she starts putting VLT's logo and brand name in the caption and starts posting content that actively says, sponsored by VLT. With this, Jen has increased her follower counts to 100,000, funneled directly 41 purchase fee per post for VLT, and ultimately achieving a revenue of 650,000 for Ensemble this way. So now that we've matured, let's take a look at how we can help influencers establish independence. Our end goal for influencers is to secure partnerships with ultimately larger brands and help market their products. To do so, there are two tactics to adopt. Firstly, we can directly reach out to them and pitch our value, or secondly, we can strategically design our posting content to attract big brands for partnership. And what would this really look like? For example, Ensemble should begin thinking earlier about what types of big brands they want to partner with for a specific influencer in the long run, and starting to place their products within the videos and contents without being sponsored by them just yet. So now that we've grown, established traction to this stage, we can then leverage our presence and experience using their products to secure partnerships with them. Ultimately, what this does is that we create mutual benefit. For virtual influencers, we can secure large deals for revenue, increasing reach and credibility. But for large brands on the other end, we gain better control of their messaging while remaining cheaper to operate in the long run. In addition, large brands are not limited in creativity when they work with virtual influencers like Jen. Let's take a look at Jen's journey again as she establishes relationships with a big brand. For Jen, she's always wanted to work with Pandora since her mother gave her that pretty necklace that she still owns to this day. Strategically, Jen and her back-end operations team starts posting content featuring her Pandora items without actually labeling that it's from Pandora. But then now that she's grown so much traction, and then she's able to more likely to secure a contract with Pandora by leveraging the organic posts that she's already been making, her familiarity with the brand, and the reach of her audience. For Jen, the results are impactful. She's now sitting at 750,000 followers, attracting over 200 purchases per post for Pandora products, and now earns a revenue for Ensemble of 1.4 million. And here's an outlook of what the pricing structure would look like for Ensemble. The first step, Birth, earns no revenue as we're preparing to design the characteristics and story of Jen. Then in Grow, we help small businesses test out their products while still being a nano influencer. So in that case, we can charge them $100 a month to help them market their products without displaying their brand names. Then, in maturity, we will charge $2,500 per post and $5,500 per post when they partner with large brands in the independent stage. Now, to implement everything, we'll be doing some pre-launch work to firstly form that back-end team and design the influencer story with Soman AI. Then we expect that it'll take influencers 3 months to go from birth to the beginning of grow. Then another 3 to 4 months to get from grow to the beginning of maturity. And from the 9th month to the end of the 2nd year, they will be in the mature stage, starting to secure larger brands after the 2nd year. With this, once the first influencer in that industry is a success, we'll be introducing our second influencer in another industry. On the bottom of the slide is some logistics implementation where we're reaching out to SMEs to test their products in the beginning and start strategically plan our content to secure large partners. Now, Ian, how much impact do we really generate?
Of course, Annabeth, I'm so glad you asked. Starting with our growth phase, although our follower count is at a modest 8.5K, we seek to reach up to 36 SMEs annually by providing key analytics essential to growing their business. Where we're able to provide even greater opportunity is in the maturity and independence of Gen, where CPM or cost per 1,000 impressions can be dropped from $9.96 to $4.01, both of which are well within the range of existing Instagram influencers. Now, let's take a look at our awareness funnel for Gen at our independence phase at the bottom of the slide. Starting from our target 750,000 followers, we can follow along the funnel rates on the very bottom to arrive at our final purchase count of 225. Multiplying this out across our average advertised product dollar amount of $50 for the independence phase, this provides a product sale of $11,000, double the amount businesses are paying per post. Further, although the 225 purchases may seem like an extremely low conversion, the metrics we want to key in on are the interaction and click-throughs. Gen is able to convert 50,000 social media users from awareness to engagement, with 4.5 thousand users taking the extra step to truly discover what the advertised business is all about. Finally, let's take a look at the financial feasibility to build up Gen. As seen on the top left, the key driver to Gen's performance is through a follower and post count, which we expect to continuously rise as Gen progresses through her maturation. In the graph on the top right, we can observe what this amounts to in terms of profit. Gen's main source of revenue comes from her branded posts, which start at 3 a week during her growth phase and gradually increase to the influencer average of 5 a week by the time she's reached the end of her maturity phase. What's important to note is that although Gen operates at a loss for the first 2 years, given the high upfront cost for design and development, margins are able to turn positive by year 3, where long-run marginal cost has been significantly decreased, with most expenses amount to a constant year-to-year fixed costs. Now, taking this across our planned suite of influencers, the effects of the high upfront costs are evident once again, with the project not able to turn a profit until year 4. However, by year 5, we can already see the compounded effects from 3 of our influencers turning a profit, supporting the development costs for our 4th and 5th influencers introduced in year 4 and 5 respectively. With our process comes risks, and we've identified 3 key risks. Most likely but least severe is a risk of potentially lower engagements than expected on our posts. We see mitigation in using platform-provided post-boosting advertisement strategies to demand even more engagements. With our growth solution, although we see risk in an organic product placement resulting in copied designs popping up across the market, as influencers, we need to ensure SMEs understanding that such a risk is possible when providing authentic data analytics on organic product placements. Finally, least likely are SMEs who command a need for logo placement when seeking market research from us. In this case, we could offer an alternative to organic product placements, bringing forth an adjusted value and pricing model. Virtual influencing is still a new and exciting market to explore, and our plan to help Ensemble introduce a new suite of influencers will create a new force in the market. Like Gen, we will help them walk through their birth, growth, maturity, and independence. But these steps for Gen and other virtual influencers are also the future path for Ensemble and the virtual influencing world. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we'd like to open up the floor to any questions.
Thank you very much, team from University of Toronto. And I look at my colleagues to put a timer to 15 minutes. We're going to have 15 minutes for Q&A. Judges, when you're ready, please unmute yourself and ask the first question.
Hey, firstly, Team Toronto, great job, fantastic. Really, really enjoyed the clarity of your vision, of your solution, the way that you laid it out. And I must admit that these slides are brilliant, right? I think it's the simplicity of the slides that tells the story as well. So really well done. I have a couple of questions, but I'll ask my first one. Maybe I'll ask two, and then I'll pass it on. Around. So one, your assumption is that someone like Pandora will want to come and work with Jen. What stops Pandora from creating their own virtual influencers? They can have one to as many as they want because they're P&L owner. Why should they come to Jen? The second one is, how do you ensure that the followership remains and the freshness of the influencer remains and people continue to follow? Because I find myself unfollowing people on TikTok and on Instagram once they get a bit boring and jaded, right? I think it's going to cost, it's not just the cost of producing the content, it's the cost of having absolute creativity in the back end. And you will need fresh thinking. You will probably need 10 or 12 people to be doing the thinking on behalf of what is topical at the moment, what should I be talking about, etc., etc. And this entire creativity might need this full backend team also needs to keep refreshed, else they will get jaded. So how are you going to tackle those two challenges?
For sure.
Go ahead.
I'll take on the first question. I'll pass it on to Sarah for the second question. So in regards to why Pandora can't just make their own virtual influencer, why come to us? I think here's really the caveat, because in the very first step, birth, we do a lot of work framing the character and personality of that character. For example, we have a team of analytics and strategy personnel who what they do is they look in that industry. Let's say Jen works in the fashion industry as an influencer virtually. They look into fashion industry, they accumulate all the trends, and they conduct what's called strategic foresight to predict what's going to happen in the future. So they collect all data points, a lot of analytics, and then now they have a lot of, they develop a character who fits perfectly into what consumers want: authenticity, being in that industry, expertise to know what's going on in that industry, so they can provide a good recommendation to their audience. Because what we also found is that a lot of consumers tend to want to know good recommendations from that influencer. And because we collected so much analytics and data from our back-end team, they can develop that story effectively for Jen. So now she's different from a regular Pandora personnel. Jen is all-inclusive. She knows everything about the fashion industry, not just Pandora products. She knows everything about what the most current trends are, what the future trends could look like based on the analytics provided by the back-end team. And now I'm going to pass it on to Sarah for the second part.
Yeah, for sure. So just to remind myself of the second question you were asking about, was it the unique, sorry, could you remind me of the second question?
So you will need a bunch of people, your backend team, to be coming up with creativity on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
And that backend team could also attract, right? So you will have to have, and the backend team could get jaded, because if actual influencers get jaded, and I find myself dropping off following influencers,
sure.
How do you ensure freshness? How do you ensure that the magic sauce continues?
Absolutely. And I think that's where we actually have an advantage of being a virtual versus an in-person influencer. In fact, following content creators, we see a lot of them drop off after their kind of phase of when their content is relevant. And so having that benefit of that past data, as well as the analytics to be able to understand current trends in the market, is a lot of the responsibility of the data, and then that analytics lead to take that data and convert that to insights. And so we see that by having that data at access, it's so much easier to follow those trends and ensure that the content is staying relevant. Whereas an in-person influencer might kind of fall out of touch with those trends because they don't have the ability to keep up. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, let me ask a question. from the slide towards the end of the presentation, it's clear that the business case has quite a steep J-curve. So we're making losses for 3 years. We start to turn positive in year 4 and year 3 and year 4?
Yeah, for an individual from year 3, and then for the group from year 4.
Yeah, so there's a fairly steep J-curve here, which indicates there's a certain level of risk. The steeper the J-curve, the more risk you're taking. You're sinking in quite a lot of investment up front and hoping that investment is going to pay back down the line. Now, in going for an industry approach, the implication there is you need a different influencer for each industry, which would imply even more costs up front. Because if you've got 3 different industries, 4 different industries, then you've got 4 different influencers, and the investment cost is multiplied by 3 or 4 times. Did you look at other alternatives to that approach? I'm just curious as to what other alternatives you considered before arriving at this approach of being industry-led, as opposed, for example, for having one influencer targeted at a particular age group that might act like we all act, which is we buy products across many different sectors, not just one sector. So I'm curious about your thinking and how you arrived at this industry approach, knowing that that's going to lead to having to have one influencer per industry and the attendant costs that brings up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for asking. So over here in our analysis, we did create a decision matrix on deciding like the kind of alternatives. Should we promote an influencer like for a certain country, for a certain industry, brand, or all encompassing? And as you can see, the 3 metrics that we had were like cost, scalability, authenticity, and connectivity. And the metrics that are later on the table are all relative. The reason why we decided to come to industry was because we felt that the range of products and services were specific enough for the data analytics team on the virtual influencer to be able to like constantly, find new products and services to promote on the virtual influencing. And the reasons why it's scalable is because, there's obviously for example, the beauty industry is not going to be limited to one country. It's going to be able to go as large as you want. And authenticity and connectivity is because we know that industry influencers, human influencers, are already succeeding in the industries. And then one last point that I would like to bring out with why industry we believe is going to be successful is because in the long run, let's say Jen becomes successful when she starts competing with human influencers in a specific industry, we know that she will be like the #1 leader influencer because of the fact that she has the data analytics. She's always constantly able to promote that new content because she's not just one person who's, say, loyal to one brand, for instance. So these are the 4 reasons why we chose to do by industry.
And if I may add on a bit about the financial end in terms of the risks of having that huge steep J-curve. Actually, as of right now, we have our business model is based on a base advertising model with only dollars per post. But we could also implement a method where we have dollar per post plus a % cut on revenue. So right now we see our conversion rate at 5%, giving us $16,000 per post just from product placements. We could offer our sponsorships and our partners a deal where we actually add on a revenue cut for ourselves. And that would also kind of flatten out the curve and ensure that we're able to get even more revenue, even in the earlier year 3 and year 4 stages where we don't see as much because of that only per post limit we have.
Mr. Sutta, I think you're muted. Could you mute yourself?
Yeah, I'm just unmuted. Now, I had a few questions, but in the interest of time, I'll ask only one. Because I come from a creative industry, I will ask a commercial question. I'm sure my banking friends right there must be wondering what I'm doing. So it's very clear that you have selected a pricing model that is CPM based. However, you are benchmarking the CPM against other influencer CPMs. My point of view, or I just need a view from you on this, is that the bigger pond of revenue lies in the entire digital space of CPM. So what's the CPM of display? What's the CPM on Facebook or on YouTube? Why would you peg yourself to a smaller business pool which just restricts itself to influencers rather than pricing it down but playing the volume game? More so because you're building a portfolio. I mean, it's sort of connected to Stuart's point. Because you're building a portfolio of these influencers, which means you have the ability to play with volume. So that's sort of the question. And the related question is, don't you think, and this is a point of view, don't you think virtual influencers are more, when you build a virtual influencer, you're actually building a media publishing house rather than building an influencer business? So that's it. So those are the things.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of the cost per the CPM, in contrary to our per post method that we've employed here, I think our biggest thing is that volume is a play that we could have as we go more long term. In our implementation, we actually only have one influencer first year, 2, 3, 4, 5 in respective years. We don't want to have all of our influencers overlapping each other and having that cost be overlapped all on 1 year and having a hard time make that back. We're trying to secure our revenues from our per post basis from each year to year from each of our first influencers that we create, and trying to adjust our approach later to see how we could fit that into other businesses. And maybe that's when we start leveraging the CPM. In terms of CPM right now, our business isn't scaled off of the CPM, but rather scaled off of the follower count and the conversion rate that we could offer in terms of our post views, interactions, and swipe ups. And that's seen in our funnel right here. And I could also pass on to Julia right here, who could talk a bit more about small businesses.
All right, so I just wanted to clarify a point on like why we decided to target small businesses in the first place. We're seeing this as an entry point because obviously influencers want to partner with businesses somehow. Well, should we do big or small businesses? Big businesses are already super successful with human influencers. So the reason why we think small businesses will be willing to like test their products pre-launch with us is because, like we said, it's cost effective. They're not limited by location, and as well as the fact that like we're able to promote this product without having them like risk any, they don't have to risk actually sending out the product to the rest of the world. So that's kind of a clarification of why we do small first, and then we'll scale up to big later as seen by our mature and independence phase.
Let me ask the second question then. In going the industry route, to what extent are you concerned about potential conflicts between customers? Because if you're in jewelry and you're dealing with 10 different jewelry companies, there could be conflicts there, perceived conflicts from your end customer. How do you see that risk, and how do you manage that?
For sure. I can definitely jump in on the risk portion of this. So I think this would be sort of a high probability but low severity risk in terms of how we envision this to pan out. And I think the rationale behind this is that we can simply mitigate this with specific contracts laying out, here are all the current players we're working with. If you don't feel comfortable being associated with current players that we're working with, then this is not the right contract for you. So I think it's just being very clear in that we are offering a lot of different services in terms of marketing. And another mitigation we could implement is having timed phrases for different player. So in the winter, maybe we'll have Pandora on board. In the summer, we'll have another player on board, Tiffany, for example. Depending on what their campaign is. Say Tiffany had a campaign surrounding summer jewelry, then we'll partner up with them in the summer and not operate with any other players. Say Pandora had a winter Christmas sale, that's when we bring them on in the winter phase and not partner up with Tiffany in that case. So that would be an example of how we mitigate that risk.
Mm-hmm. And just to quickly jump in with that last bit on the customer end. So really what we see is this is a real thing in the influencer world as well. And I think the benefit of us having that data is that we can highlight certain benefits from certain products. So for example, certain skincare brands have certain benefits, whereas others have different benefits for different types of skincare. So having the information to be able to educate customers, we're really giving them a more informed perspective rather than a really biased opinion. So that's how we can ensure we're really targeting the customers in an effective way. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Team Toronto. This is the end of the Q&A. Welcome back, Mr. Balaji. We're now going to have some deliberation with the judges. We're going to move you to a waiting room. After a few minutes, we will call you back in to receive direct feedback from the judges on your presentation. Thank you again for this, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Please leave the room.